Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 121 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening here in early December, and I'm joined not by Scott Coleman. We had all kinds of Colemans going on earlier this week. This time around, it's myself and a recovering Stephen Tolbert back from the dead. Hello, sir. How are you?
Brad, what's up, buddy? Yeah, it's good to be on. It's been like 10 days since I've done one of these. I went on a trip and then came back and got immediately sick, which is always fun. But yeah, I was recovering while the Coleman Squared podcast. They did a tremendous job, of course. Everybody loves the Coleman. So it's always good to switch it up a little bit, Sean and Scott, me and you doing a show. So, but some interesting stuff to talk about tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about payroll. A couple of things have happened around the sport we'll talk about, but it's always good to be on with you, man.
Yes, you as well. And if you missed the show, or if you're just listening for the first time, first of all, thank you for joining us here at Hammer Territory. Please subscribe to the show. We are part of the Foul Territory Network. Ratings and reviews appreciated, but also we did have the aforementioned Coleman extravaganza. We have 4 co-hosts on this show. Usually it is pairing of Sean Coleman, Stephen, and then me and Scott. We've changed it up a little bit this week. And before that, also did a deep dive into Orlando Arcia that was, as you might expect, Stephen, well received by all. Everyone loves Orlando Arcia. But anyway, that's the last couple shows on the network. But you sort of allude to it. Most of the show is going to be payroll focused. Not the sexiest topic necessarily, but certainly one that matters when you're building a baseball team. And kind of tangentially involved in that, I wanted to at least note this because there's not a lot of Braves news. In fact, there's like almost no Braves news in the last couple of days. But a lot of attention being paid to the pitching market in free agency right now because it's gotten pretty expensive. And there was a head-turning deal today that was reported and then confirmed by multiple people. Jeff Passan of ESPN reported it first, and he reported a 3-year, $67 million deal for Luis Severino with, drumroll please, the A's, the team that does not spend any money whatsoever. That shocked everyone, not necessarily just the A's part, but that was a big part of it, but also a lot of money for Severino. And I'm bringing it up to you now, Stephen, because the Braves are potentially in this market looking for a pitcher to add, and I think every single one of these deals so far has come in at the very least at or usually above projections, which is a little scary if you're a team that's trying to get a starting pitcher.
Yeah, I thought I was having a fever dream. I thought I was still sick. Some of these contracts, these pitching contracts have been like, I have no idea what's going on. I think, let me say this. I think the fact that it's so hard to make trades in July now because of expanded playoffs, I think teams are putting more emphasis on off-season acquisitions and free agents than they ever have before. I think it's very tough to make trades for impact pitching in July now. And I think that's part of what you're seeing, but why the Oakland A's are spending like $22 million, the next highest paid player on their team is $5 million. Like Severino makes $22 million on that team now. The next highest paid guy on that team is $5 million with Brent Rooker.
And they're also moving. You call them the Oakland A's. They're no longer the Oakland A's. They're the Sacramento A's at the moment. So
the AAA A's. Yeah, that was the weirdest one we've seen. He got an opt-out as well on top of being, I guess because they're playing in a AAA park, they're going to have to pay more than what other teams are going to have to pay to convince guys to go play there. I don't know. Maybe that's why he got more than he was projected to get. But yeah, the pitching market is wild, and it matters for the Braves. Like you just said, like they're in this market. Like we've talked about them with Evaldi. We've talked about them with other guys. And if this is going to be the market, it's brutal. And we've said that before, that pitching is the most expensive thing you can go get, especially in free agency. But it's at another level right now, quite honestly. And because it's so hard to make trades, because everybody needs more pitching, nobody has enough pitching, the prices are just going to be crazy. And I don't know. It's very possible the Braves that the Braves just get priced out of this market. I don't know if they're going to pay. We thought we could probably get Evaldi for 22 million, something like that. But Kylie McDaniel had a tweet today where I think it's been like 12% up from everybody's projection. Like every pitcher that's gotten a multi-year deal has been up 12%. So I don't know that you're going to get Eovaldi at 22. And I don't know how much higher the Braves are comfortable going on a guy his age. So it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see if the trade market picks up because the free agent market is so expensive. If the Garrett Crochet stuff picks up, there's a couple of interesting names out there that we could, that we've talked about before with trades. But yeah, it's a wild market right now for pitching.
It really is. And, there are still names out there, but like every time there's one pitcher coming off the board, the pool also shrinks. Yeah. So like, just to name the names that have signed so far, Severino was on the list that we kind of posited. Kikuchi, Frankie Montas a little bit lower down. He signed a 2-year deal for relatively big money. Matthew Boyd got 2 for $29. Those are all real money contracts of guys who were at least potentially on the Braves' radar before you even get to Blake Snell, who got the big deal, the 5-year big deal as well. And there's still names out there. But Alex, you know this, Stephen, but Alex tends to not like to focus on one guy. He kind of tries to find the best value available in a lot of these different moves that he ends up making. It's harder to do that when everybody's getting overpaid. Like your value kind of has to move a little bit, or else you're just gonna, like you just sort of alluded to, get nobody. And plan C and plan D come in. People asked about Max Fried this week. If I had to guess right now what Max is going to get, it's going to be more than I would have guessed 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, which makes probably it less likely that he comes back to Atlanta, for instance. So there's always domino effects. Even Charlie Morton, I think Charlie probably, if he pitches this year, is going to pitch somewhere close to home, but he may not sign for the $8 million we were dreaming about if he comes back. It might be 12 now. You know what I mean? It's it's interesting machinations, and we won't preview the whole thing again because we've done this a lot already this winter, but it all impacts the Braves, and it makes life harder when everybody's getting overpaid, or at least more than we thought they were going to get.
Well, and it also highlights, Ronaldo Lopez is making $8 million next year. That contract looks like a heist. I mean, and I put this in our DMs earlier. I was talking to Scott. Maybe that's the new market inefficiency is converting relievers because you're still getting somewhat reliever prices. Jeff Hoffman's been out there as a potential converted reliever to starter guy.
Yep.
And maybe we see Alex go that route again because you can get value where there's not a lot of value to get at the moment just because prices are so high. So I don't know. I would not be surprised at all if the Braves maybe tried to go that route again. But yeah, in retrospect, we knew that contract was unbelievably good, but it looks like an absolute steal right now. And yeah, it's, any team that signs a free agent pitcher right now, you're just holding your breath and hoping that they did just, blow it out the water. And like you said, the Braves are in this market, so it's going to be fascinating to see what they do.
So from here, most of the show will be about the Braves payroll, which we've been talking about doing a show on for a while. It was a good time to do that now because there's not a whole lot going on. So it's a good time to kind of set the stage a little bit. We've alluded to some of these things before, but the terms are all fluid. Cash payroll, what contracts are, competitive balance tax considerations, what guys count against the competitive balance tasks. It's all interesting stuff. And I know Scott and I answered this mailbag question the other day about this, but about, people always ask us now, are the Braves going to even go over the luxury tax, even though they were way over it last year? And there's a theory, conspiracy or otherwise, that they might not go over it again this year. All that to say, Stephen, I wonder what you think of it, because I think you're our resident of the four of us financial expert in the baseball world. I don't want to put that on you too much, but it is what it is. I think you're the one that's most well-schooled in this area of the four of us. What do you make of the situation right now? Because the Braves have a lot of money committed, obviously, to key pieces, and they're not at the bottom of the league, but they're not the Dodgers either at this moment in time. They're not spending absolutely through the roof. I mean, I guess we should probably go through the cash stuff first, because that's the publicly available, easy to consume, guys making this added up in a spreadsheet kind of thing. But what do you make of the cash payroll stuff right now for the Braves?
Yeah, it's, the Braves are spending at a level that we've never seen before. I mean, we don't talk about it a lot because, spending used to be a really big topic. And I know you talked about it a lot back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't on the show, but I remember sending many, many tweets about how the Braves had no business running the payroll they were running. They very frequently we would get to a season where they ran $110, $120 million payroll, despite being in the market that they were in. That is not the case anymore. I mean, the Braves have, so if you look at 2025, the Braves have kind of a big 7. They have 7 kind of big contracts that I would call that are guaranteed. and that is Chris Sale, Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Ronald Acuna Jr., Marcelo Ozuna, Raisel Iglesias, and Sean Murphy. Those 7 guys alone make $130 million next year. And it wasn't but 5 years ago where that would have been the Braves' entire payroll. And so it's gone up substantially. And, there are people that will debate, is it smart to pay a closer $16 million, Sean Murphy for $15 million? How smart is that? You can debate all that all you want, but the bottom line is the Braves are spending a substantial amount of money relative to what they used to spend. And they're not quite to the Dodger Mets, stratosphere, but they are in that next tier, kind of that 5 through 8 tier in the league in terms of spending. But if you look at all of their guaranteed contracts right now, they have 15 players under guaranteed contracts that have $180 million guaranteed. So add in the pre-arbitration guys, add in Kelnick, add in Dylan Lee, all the arbitration guys that we just saw get tendered contracts, and then you add in the pre-arb guys, the league minimum guys that always fill out your team. The Braves are looking at about $195 million payroll right now as we sit here today.
In cash. Again, one more time. That's always it's easier when you have visuals, but because this is an audio medium, that's the cash payroll, which is different than the CBT. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, we'll get to CBT here in a minute. That's cash. That's just pure. This is what the Braves owe the guy for the year. Cash is the easiest to figure out. And for a reference point, last year, it's always a little trickier to figure out end of year payroll because when you make trades midseason, that teams very rarely report exactly how much money they're paying down on a guy's contract when they trade for him, like the Soler trade, the Luke Jackson deal. We don't know exactly how much money they ended up spending on either one of those guys. So the end of year cash is a little trickier, but the Braves spent around $230 million last year in cash for their payroll. So they're around 195 now. It was at 230 around that to end last year. So just on the cash side, it would seem the Braves have around 30 million to spend if payroll stays the same. Alex did say it's going to go up, but Alex said a lot of stuff in that press conference.
I was going to say that's the point we have to make. Is he did say that very plainly. If you're just catching up now, I know not everybody listens to every episode. Alex on this same exact interview with the media said that they were not going to change their coaching staff, and they did. He also said they were going to pick up all the options, and they did not. They declined Travis's options, so he's batting 0 on declarative statements on that same call. But I think still, if you had to guess, it's not a lock by any means. But when he could have easily not said anything, and he went out of his way to say payroll will go up. Now I don't know what that means. Neither does Stephen. Things could change. I'm fond of saying this. Alex is not the person who decides how much money they spend. He has bosses. Terry McGurk is the face of that. There's it's all changed in the last year plus, but Braves Holdings, all that stuff. But Terry McGurk is his boss. Alex is not the person writing the check. He's the person assigning the checks as far as how much they're spending, but he has a number that he is given that he has to fit under. So all that can change, but he did say on the record that it's going to go up. And that's what we kind of have to go off of, at least to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, up until this last year, like anytime Alex lies to the media or lies to the fans, he always does it he's always done it in a creative way where he gave kind of a non-answer. This last one was the first time where I've actually heard him give up like straight up just dishonest answers.
It was very weird. It was very weird too, because like,
strange.
And look, I know I'm kind of inner weird because I'm fully in the media when it comes to the Atlanta Hawks. I cover them every day basically and do this whole thing. I deal with a lot of people in that world, less in baseball, but he could have easily not answered the question. And that's what makes it interesting is Alex is usually, like Steven just alluded to, an artful dodger. He'll just kind of smile at you and be like, hey, I'm not going to answer that kind of thing. And he didn't do that, which was easy. He could have been like, I'll tell you guys in 2 weeks, So it's been very odd. And I don't think that it's like a sea change for Alex. It might have just been a circumstance or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was just more odd than anything else is what I'll say. There's easier ways to say nothing.
He's the master of giving you a 2,000 word answer that has no substance in it.
We have tried to use some audio on the show from Alex in the past, and it's like, can I even use this? What's the point? What's the point of playing this for people?
he's the master at it, and that was what made that end of season press conference so odd, is because he didn't do that. He just gave very clear answers that turned out to be not true. And we've never seen that from him before. So yeah, we don't actually know that payroll is going up. I would be stunned if payroll is going down, though. That would be a whole nother conversation. If that happens, we'll come on here and we'll say it. We're not beholden to the team.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about like the questions we keep getting, and I get it. Right now, they just haven't done that much, and all they have done to this point, just to replay all that, is cut money. Yeah. So fans that want to get mad about that, I get it. Like if they don't do anything and all they do is cut, then we're going to kill them for that. That's what's going to happen on the show.
Yep.
I will just remind people that most of the league's business has not happened yet, so it's not. I don't want to get down that road, but avoiding the tax, all these things, like there's a world where they maybe do that, and it surprises everybody, but we're not there yet. I mean, speaking of the tax, you want to lay out the CBT threshold stuff, because that's key here in some degree. Like there's a debate across the league and across probably even in that same front office. Like how much do we care about this? Where do we draw the line? The Braves do have this mantra where they, Alex kind of said this in the past, where like he gets a round number in actual spending from his bosses, which could be massaged in every direction on CBT. So like it's a little bit of uncertainty no matter what happens here, but CBT is a factor, you would imagine.
Yeah, CBT, so competitive balance tax is what it's called. It's the luxury tax. If you've heard a different, it's the same thing, luxury tax, CBT.
Yeah.
That's the way the league sold it to the players in the CBA negotiators, was
not calling it luxury.
Yeah, right. Competitive balance. But that's what it's called. And so it operates much different than cash. I think most people probably know this by now, but just as a kind of a primer. So CBT payroll takes the average annual value of a contract versus the cash amount of a contract. And what that means is if you sign a 3-year, $30 million contract, but in the first year you make $4 million, and in the next 2 years you make, $13 million. Well, the CBT just takes the average of that. It just takes the 3-year, $30 million. So it's $10 million a year on average. And that's what it uses to calculate your luxury tax number. And so it operates different than cash payroll, whereas cash you're just counting up how much actual cash you're paying each player that year. And then the CBT also includes things that cash payroll will never even have to think about. The biggest thing being player benefits. Just like anybody else out there that has a job that has benefits. Benefits are part of compensation, and so they have to be calculated as a salary essentially, and so they get counted in your luxury tax tabulation. But we don't really know how much teams spend on benefits. There's no way to know that. We'll never know that. Sites like Fangraphs or COTS will usually stick in like a $17 million number as a guesstimate. So many teams are higher than that. Teams are lower than that. So that's why we never know exactly how much a team's actual CBT payroll is. There's also some weird stuff, when like Ronaldo Lopez renegotiated his contract because the AAV of the contract changed.
Yep.
There's a debit and credit that goes on with how your tax is calculated, and even it does it retroactively for previous years. So it is a little more complicated. But saying all that, and again, this is an estimate because we don't know for certain, the Braves CBT payroll sits around $217 million as we sit here today. Around that, it could, probably on this stuff you need to give a plus or minus, a 5 million, maybe
a few million. Yeah.
Margin of error, because we don't know. And that's important because the first luxury tax threshold where you get into penalties is at 241 million. So you take 241 minus 17. So the Braves have around 25 million to spend in AAV and luxury tax money before they get into the first penalty. I know you and Scott had this conversation because it was a mailbag question. I've seen it a ton on Twitter. People have just directly asked, do we think the Braves are ducking the tax? I personally don't see any way the Braves could possibly duck the tax unless they're just going to do trades this offseason, because 25 million gets spent like that.
And trades for cheap guys too. Like we tried to lay it out very briefly on that show, but it was like, all right, Garrett Crochet is one angle. Like he's really cheap. Go do that. But you still have other needs. And yeah, maybe in a pre-Joe Jimenez getting hurt world, there was an argument. I think our friend Eric Cole made that on the show briefly. Like, you could have traded Iglesias to save money but now that you lost Jimenez, you're not doing that anymore. That's kind of off the table. Like, there's ways to do it, but it's harder now than it's ever been before, basically, for them to cut under it. And as a reminder, like, there is a argument, public versus private, about where they landed last year in the tax line, but they were either in the second tier above it or the third tier above it, depending on where you look. Alex maintains it was in the second tier. Publicly, it's the third tier. But no matter what, they were not like just a little bit over the tax line last year. They were way over the tax line.
They were like 44 million over the first penalty.
It was not a small figure. So you figure that, maybe they don't want to go that high again. We just don't know. But we agree. I think we'll all be very surprised if they do not go into the tax at some point. It's just how high they want to go in it is really what it comes down to.
Well, remember this, that Alex always likes to hold 5 or 10 million for in-season moves. So if you've seen why too, like, he makes moves every year, no matter what happens. So, all right, so let's say the Braves want to stay under the tax. Let's say they want to stay under 241 and they got 25 million to spend. Well, you want to save 5 or 10 for the season. So that means you got $15 million to spend for your entire offseason for everything you need. You need a starter. You need 1, maybe 2 outfielders. You need a high leverage reliever. You need bench. I mean, I don't see any way, even if they wanted to, and I really don't think they care that much, to be honest. And that's the other thing I want to say is that the tax gets talked about a lot because owners like it when the tax gets talked about a lot, because it makes it seem like more of a deterrent than it really is. Like, when you look at how much these teams actually pay in tax now, like teams like the Mets, who blow by it by 150 million and half for 3 or 4 years, they're paying a decent chunk in tax. But teams like the Braves, I mean, it's really not that much money that you're actually being penalized for. So I don't think it's as big a deterrent as other people do. I don't think the Braves care about going past at least the first threshold. There might come a day where they try to get under it, but when they're so close now and they have clear needs, free agent market being what it's being, the fact that Alex likes to hold money and spend it in season, I don't see any way they stay under 241. I think people are freaking out. I think people like to freak out just because all we've seen the Braves do so far is cut money. And, people are hearkening back to the cheap Liberty Media days. Those days are long behind us, I believe. And I don't see any way they're staying below 241.
You make a great point there about, just the reality of how punitive these taxes are. And I think we agree, if you look at it closely, they matter to some degree, but there's a reason why Alex frames it the way he does and just says, look, there is a number that he's not going to tell us ever that he's allowed to spend by his bosses. And that is a all-in number. That is the tax number plus what you're paying baseball related, spending, basically, is the number that was the way that I would frame it and the way he's kind of alluded to it. And there are guys every year, just to say this out loud, that have lower cash numbers than their CBT numbers, and vice versa. It's kind of all comes out in the wash. Like right now, Olsen, Riley, Sale, Acuna, Murphy, and Ozzie all have CBT numbers that are lower than their cash numbers for this year by a little bit to some degree. But then there are other guys who have higher CBT numbers: Reynaldo Lopez, Michael Harris, Spencer Strider, Aaron Bummer. There's like not much of a sort of expensive guys, but it all kind of levels out, relatively speaking. It's not exactly going to be even, but they know this stuff better than we do publicly. They have to know that. But I do think that in general, the tax line is discussed probably more than it should be, but it's something to talk about. It does matter. Also, you lose a little bit on the draft side of things. Like, for instance, the qualifying offer stuff with Max. If Max leaves, the Braves will get less compensation than if they hadn't paid the tax. That's right. A small thing. It matters to some degree, but that's an example of one of the penalties for going over the CBT is that, let's just say Max leaves, the draft pick they will get back is worse than if they were not over the tax.
Right. Yeah. And that does matter. I mean, it's factored into the decision, but it doesn't matter nearly to the level that it gets talked about, in my opinion, especially for 90% of the teams. I mean, for the Mets and Dodgers, Yeah, they have real conversations about these penalties.
But even then, the Mets, it's Steve Cohen. He doesn't care at all. Exactly. And the Dodgers,
but when you have that much money, who cares?
Right. And I mean, this is a different thing, but it's a similar argument to teams signing guys who have qualifying offers attached. It's a little bit different, but like there are teams that just don't care. Like they're just going to do it, and it's a factor that you lose some draft picks to do it. But like if they want the guy, they're going to get the guy. Whereas other teams do care, and they actually prioritize their draft picks. And it's like, okay, not that we'll never ever sign a guy with a qualifying offer attached, but it has to kind of be a discount because we're factoring in bigger value for those draft picks and the draft pool money and all those things. So it's all kind of philosophical in the end. And it also, again, comes down to what your boss is willing to pay all in.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add on the payroll logistics? Because like we can go through it. Like you mentioned the big seven. There's another like mid tier of like 5 guys who are making between like $7 and $10 million. They have 12 guys basically that make more than $7 million on the roster right now. And none of them are logical trade candidates either. Like the only guy that kind of was Soler. They already did that. Everybody else, they could trade Ozuna, but they're probably not going to. Like there's stuff that they can do, but all the guys that are making real money, we have a mailbag question I'll ask you in a second about Sean Murphy, but putting Murphy to the side, everybody else that's on that's making real money is kind of like essential to their team. They're just kind of locked in.
Yeah, I mean, I could go through it real quick. So, like, if people don't know, like Olsen, Riley, Sale all make $22 million. Acuna makes 17. Ozuna makes 16. Iglesias makes 16. Murphy makes 15. So that's the big 7 I was talking about earlier. Then that next tier, like Joe Jimenez makes $9 million, but of course that's going to be a $9 million that's probably going to be out most of the year. And I think Sean was the first one who said this, I think, but I do think that factored a lot in them declining Darno's $8 million option because
agreed.
I don't think that was the plan originally. But when you lose $9 million and you got to replace it, then you got to find the $9 million somewhere else. So Jimenez makes 9, but it's probably not going to be around. And then you have Michael Harris who makes 8. You have Ronaldo Lopez who makes 8. Then you have Pierce Johnson at 7. You have Ozzie Albies at 7. You have Spencer Strider at 4. You have
this is his last cheap season, by the way. Strider jumps from 4 to 20 next year.
Yeah. And then you have Bummer who renegotiated his deal. He's down to $3.5 million for 2025. And then Arcia brings up the rear at $2 million for the last of the guaranteed deals. And that's how you get to the $179 million I was talking about earlier. Braves have 15 guys. Those are the 15. That's how you get to 179. And then you add in the arbitration guys, the pre-arb guys, and that's how you get to 195 total for where the Braves sit now. And if you look at that number, I think total that ends up being, when you count the pre-arb and arb guys, I think that ends up being like 22 or 23 guys total that are most likely going to be on the team in some respect or another. So, if you want to count it by roster spots, which I get is a decent way to do it actually.
Yeah.
Because you have to earmark a certain amount of money for a roster spot. Then, the Braves probably have 3, 4, or 5 roster spots they need to fill. Some of those will be, league minimum guys. Some will be minor league free agents that sign for an invite to spring training and then make the club as a league minimum guy. But some of those will be legitimate free agents that they sign or trades. But yeah, that's where the Braves sit right now.
Yeah, that's just a good primer. Again, this stuff's available in certain places on the internet if you want to find and look at it more in sort of visual form. But that's where they are. And yeah, they had that kind of dead money with Jimenez, which is unfortunate. But everybody else is a key factor. And there's obviously some heist on that list. And it changes year to year. I mean, a lot of these deals are kind of flat. But for instance, in a lot of the deals that Alex has done recently, he's changed it up so they kind of go high. They go high and low. Like, for instance, you mentioned Bummer before. Aaron goes from 3.5 up to 9.5 in 2026. Ronaldo goes from 8 up to 14 and then back down to 8. Kind of an interesting roller coaster contract. So anyway, there's some nuance, some creativity. Alex is big into that.
And by the way, I'll mention this. I think I have this. I'm doing this on memory. I think I have this right. I think this is Ozzy's. I think 2025 is Ozzy's last year of guaranteed money.
Yeah, I think he has the. Yeah,
I think he gets to the. I think you get to the club options.
Yes.
And that's notable to me, especially. And I was sick when this happened originally, but I know you guys talked about it, that Bowman put Ozzy in his potential trade, guys to look at for trades. The fact that Ozzy is coming to the end of the guaranteed portion of his extension is notable to me, because Alex has always said that when these guys sign these extensions, that they're not going to trade him. That's kind of their club policy. But once you get to the options portion of these extensions, I do wonder if that philosophy changes. And, with Ozzy's deteriorating defense, with his deteriorating offense, quite honestly, I do wonder now that, 2025 will be the last year under team control, or the guaranteed portion of his team control. I don't know. I'm musing out loud here, but I do wonder if maybe we're reaching the end of Ozzy Albies in Atlanta faster than some people maybe are thinking about.
Yeah, it's possible. Just mostly with the defense, but the counter is he's still so cheap. Like, even if you factored in his decline being permanent, and I'm not sure I'm ready to get there on offense in particular, but even if you thought he was just what he was last year, he's still a good value on that. It's $7 million this year, and both club options were $7 million. Like, if you remember, and that's the one. Like,
that's the craziest.
We won't relitigate it now, but Ozzy's contract was an all-time agent disaster, basically.
It was worse than the Acuna deal.
Much worse. Yeah. Obviously, Ronnie is much better, but Ronnie at least got to a big shiny number of $100 million that he could say, I'm going to have that for the rest of my life. And Ozzy got to like 35 guaranteed.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and at the time Ozzy signed that, he was legitimately like a top 5 second baseman. Yeah. He might not be that anymore, but at the time he signed it, he was.
Yeah, he's still above average, I think, so far. Anyway, that's something we probably dig into at some point about like his future because of his defense. Somebody actually asked us, I think it was a Mailbag show recently, could he be a DH option starting in 26? I'm like, well, if he hits this year, then maybe, because
he's got to hit better.
That's where his glove probably should be at that point in time. All right, Steve, I'm going to ask you a Mailbag question before we get out of here because it's payroll related and it came in this week. It came from Jameson. Thanks for the question. And it says, if you could snap your fingers and take any contract off the books for the Braves with no penalty, is there a deal that you would want to remove? And now this is me saying this to you to tee it up, Stephen. I think there's only 2 even potential options for this personally, but I wonder what you think.
Well, I know a lot of Braves fans would say Sean Murphy in a heartbeat.
He was one of the 2 options that's potential.
Because they're going to pay him $15 million next year, and obviously they had William Contreras, who could be making league minimum.
Well, take that away. This is not a Contreras thing. This is only moving forward from now.
Yeah,
you have the contract, and Murphy. Just to say out loud, Murphy has $15 million a year for 4 more years. Yeah. That's really the question there. And then the other one, just to say my personal one, would be Joe Jimenez, who is awesome. Joe Jimenez was awesome last year, but when you have a reliever who has 2 years, $18 million left on their deal, and they probably can't pitch for one of those seasons in full, you probably would just want to take the deal off if you had a choice. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean the biggest contract on the books is Riley, but I don't. He's making his AAV is in such a strong spot at $22 million a year that that one doesn't really bother me much.
Yeah, Riley and Olsen are both in that like very low $20 million a year AAV, and I think. Yeah, they're not risk-free contracts, and Riley's is longer, but those guys are so obviously worth more than that, and they would get more than that on the market if they hit the market now, very obviously. So it's like, I don't think you could say take it off. Like, I get it. There's some risk there, but those guys are just really good.
Yeah. And Ozuna and Iglesias are basically on 1-year deals now.
Yep.
So, I mean, I would have said before the show, I would have said probably Iglesias, but then he went out and was the best closer in baseball.
Yeah.
One of the best.
And there was obviously a time where we all would have taken the Ozuna contract away if we could have.
Yeah, of course.
No longer the case. So, like, I mean, it's actually a testament to the Braves books that there isn't a super slam dunk. I think Jimenez is, for me, it's pretty easy, yes, because of the injury.
What's his? Is he? He's got 1 more year after. Does Jimenez have 1 more year?
Jimenez has this year at $9 million, 25, and then another year at $9 million.
Yeah.
So there's a chance that he is back to being worth $9 million in 2026. But the problem is this year, if he does come back, it's going to be like in September, and he won't be worth $9 million this year. So like
I will throw a dark horse in here.
Okay.
Spencer Strider has 2 Tommy John surgery, or he has
Yeah,
he has
does.
two serious elbow surgeries. People get mad when you call this last one a Tommy John surgery.
Well, okay. Just to lay it out there for people, Spencer only has 4 guaranteed years on the contract.
Right.
And one of them is this year, which is super cheap. He has 3 big money years. And even then, it's big money in quotes. He basically has the Luis Severino contract guaranteed to him.
Right.
So even if you are skeptical, and it's fair to be skeptical of Strider on some level because of what you just said, guys that have 2 elbow issues like that,
that's scary.
It's scary.
Yeah.
The counter is if he was even 80% of the pitcher he's been in the past, it's still a bargain.
Yeah.
And I don't think the Braves, even with their information, would take that deal away if they could. Because look, if he hits the market in free agency, and by the way, he wouldn't hit the market now anyway. They bought out some ARB, but it was at the end. He'd still be in arbitration right now, which would probably be cheap. But man, if he was available to every team in the league, he'd get a lot of money right now. Like there's no question about it.
I just don't like owing pitchers a lot of money.
Neither do they. He's the one exception that they've ever done, and I think it was because of how crazy outlier he is.
So that would probably, I mean, if you said you can't pick Jimenez or Murphy, I guess Strider. I mean, just because they owe him $60-something million over the next 4 years.
I think he's owed. Yeah, the total guarantee portion is still. I think it's over 70 because he's got 4 this year. And that last year, that's a club option. He's owed like $5 million no matter what.
The buyout,
but still, I think that that's.
But like you said, that's the fact that we can't just immediately. I mean, there are tons of teams out there that's not. It's not even a question.
Right. And again, they had one with Ozuna. It just happened to correct itself. Yeah. One note on Murphy, because that's the one we will not relitigate Murphy on this podcast. We're too far in. That'll be a different show. Scott and I did the Arcia breakdown. We will have a Murphy breakdown episode. That's going to happen this winter. But it's $15 million a year. But just as a reminder to everybody that hates John Murphy now for whatever reason, it's fine. He was not very good this year. We will all acknowledge that. In the 3 seasons before this past year, Fangraphs had him being worth an average of $35.9 million per season for 3 years. He's making $15 million. So even if he is half of the player he was in Oakland and even the first year in Atlanta, he is worth $15 million a year. So like, I get that's a lot of money. That's probably the worst contract they currently have because of the way he played last year. I still believe Murphy's going to be good moving forward. But if you didn't, I would understand not wanting that contract, but just worth keeping in mind like how good he was. And he doesn't have to actually be that good to be worth $15 million a year.
Well, in catcher defense, it sneaks up on you in terms of value, but you don't have to hit that much. Like we got spoiled because Murphy put up like a 130 WRC plus in his first year with the Braves, but like that's not normal. Like most catchers post like a 110, and not let me rephrase. The best catchers usually post like a 1. I was
gonna say most catchers do not do that.
Yeah, most catchers post around like a 70.
One of my tent poles is, and I will always say this: if you're a recurring listener for years now, you will be probably laughing. The baseline at catcher is so much lower than people think that it is.
Yeah, it's
the vast majority of starting catchers in the league are not good hitters. That's just what it is. Even guys who are, if you could guarantee 100 WRC plus at catcher, you are in the top 10 at catcher. There's just no question about it. Probably top 7.
Especially if that dude is a plus framer, if he's a plus game caller, if he's a plus, base thrower. So yeah, there's a very, very good chance that Murphy could be average with a bat next year and still exceed $15 million of value.
Oh, yes. In fact, I will almost guarantee you if he puts up a 95 WRC plus next year, he'll be worth $15 million or more. So anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day. That's the one. Well, I should say this. Jimenez is the one I would choose. If you gave me one out right now, I would pick Jimenez. I think that Murphy is a very reasonable answer. If you don't believe that he's going to bounce back, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm on the other side of that one, but I at least get it because he was quite bad this year at the plate. That's worth acknowledging. But it's a good sign that they don't have any of the big deals. And look, knock on wood, something can happen to Austin Riley or Matt Olson. They could just fall off a cliff, and those deals look terrible in a year or two. That's possible. It's happened before. But part of why they did those deals is that they're not $40 million a year deals. They're making $22 million. And that's weatherable in a way that some of these mega deals have not been. Like your Albert Pujols deals or whatever, some of these like have gotten out of control contracts that have just ended terribly. They're not making that much money. It's a lot of money, but it's not. And these guys are in their primes for another 4 or 5 years, probably by the aging curve.
Riley is still like 27.
Yeah, these guys are not old. I don't have their ages. Oh, yes, I do. Riley's 28 as of he's about to start. He's about to start his age 28 season, so I think he's still 27 right now. Olsen's still only 30. Like those guys are probably not going to be, if you follow the aging curve, tailing off for a few more seasons. So I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, and the only other guy that you could talk about, because, well, I'll say this. I'm very curious to see what they do with Chris Sale in the middle of this they're in the middle of this Chris Sale contract right now. They've got one more year of guaranteed money, which is 2025, and then they've got a club option. But typically what the Braves do is they use the leverage of that club option as a way to renegotiate a deal in the middle of the season somewhere.
Charlie Morton.
See Charlie Morton about 1,000 times.
Yeah.
They did it with Travis d'Arnaud constantly. And I'm guessing that's what they're going to do here. And I love what Chris Sale did for the Braves, but I am a little bit scared of the contract they're going to give him I just don't want this to be like a 3-year thing. I would, if he's willing to do like a 1+1 for, the next 3 or 4 years, the way Charlie did, I'll take it all day.
Yeah.
But I'm a little worried there might be like a 2 or 3 year deal coming at some point.
That's not an unreasonable concern. Right now it's 22 for this year and a club option for 18 million. Look, he could get hurt again or whatever, but
I don't like owing pitchers money.
I think Alex agrees with you, and that's the thing. I mean, that's
except for relievers.
Well, right, he's big on relievers, and that's a difference that I probably have with him. But that's part of the reason across baseball that dating back to like April this year, people in the league were like, they're not signing Max Fried because Alex has not been willing to spend big money for a long time on pitchers.
There's not
he hasn't done it.
I don't know how you feel, Brad. There's not a chance in hell I would sign Max Fried.
I am softer on that than you. I get why you wouldn't. And honestly, like if you said, okay, pay Max Fried his market rate for 6 seasons, is that a good contract? Probably not. I tend to fall on the it isn't my money side of things in a non-salary cap sport like baseball. But yeah,
if you told me that contract wasn't going to be prohibitive and them doing other stuff,
that's what I mean. Yeah, but you're right. I don't think that they're going to do that. That's one answer. But also, yeah, I would hate it less than you. But I think if they do it, I'll say this on the show. Like it's not going to be a good contract, most likely. How many of the big pitching deals have ever been good contracts? It's a small handful.
It's like Max Scherzer, and that's the end of the list.
That he might be the only one that has ended well. Like and look, on the episodes we talked about before this, and I promise we'll sign off soon. We've all said this at different points, all 4 of us, I think. Any deal like that with anyone, take the emotional stuff of Max out of it, because that's part of this too. And Braves fans love Max, and they should. He's been awesome. But removing that, you got to get value in the beginning of those contracts. Any free agent deal you're signing for 6 years, especially for the pitcher, but even position players to some degree, you got to be confident those guys are going to give you huge production early in that contract, because by the end, they're all going to end badly. You should assume they're going to end badly on any 6-year deal like that for a free agent. Even if it's Willy Adames, I will say the same thing. If they sign Willy Adames to a 6-year deal, I'm going to say on the show, you know what? Year 6 probably won't be good. you got to get the value early on, and that's what you're going for. And the Braves are in a position where it makes more sense than a lot of teams to do a deal like that, because you're all in now. You are trying to win the World Series every year with the core you have right now. So they're not like, it's not like the Orioles where you have this super long runway like some teams do. The Braves are in right now. They are. So I get it. But you have to be honest with yourself about signing Max or name anybody, any big name player for a big kind of deal like that. It's about the present more than the future. It just is.
There's no way, it's impossible to mitigate all the risk, because pitching is so important to winning a World Series that you have to take a risk somewhere. Like the Chris Sale trade was a risk, and the Chris Sale, the extension they gave him after the trade was a risk. But it was the type of risk that teams should take with pitching. It was a short-term risk. It was like a 2-year risk.
Alex loves a short-term risk. Loves it.
And the Red Sox were paying all of his salary in 2024. Like they minimalized the downside as best they could. And that's, in my opinion, that's the best way to handle pitching. And the worst way to handle pitching is say, oh, you're a 31-year-old with a bulky left elbow and you want 6 years and $170 million. Here you go. So I would love them if they would keep doing these 2-year, if Evaldi wants like a 2-year deal, they want to do Jeff Hoffman, if they want to keep going with relievers, try to get some value out of that, converting them to starters. But
trade for Jordan Montgomery's $22.5 million player option. That's my new Alex projection is a trade for Jordan Montgomery.
Let the Diamondbacks pay half of it because that's what they're probably going to have to pay to move it. So
even then, even if it was less than that, I would probably, if you just say take it, I would probably take it.
Those are the type of deals that I love.
Yeah,
7 years and $180 million for a pitcher. No,
I think we tend to agree on that. All right, Stephen, we've gone longer than we expected to go because that's what's going to happen on this podcast. Anything else you want to say? Feel free. If not, tell folks where they can find all of your work if they have not found it already.
I'm just happy to be alive, honestly. When you're sick,
you're feeling good, man.
Yeah, when you're sick, you're just like, just get me healthy. That's all I care about. Just get me healthy. So I'm just happy to be alive. I think the Juan Soto news is going to break in the next 4 days. That's what Jeff Passan has said before the winter meetings, and the winter meetings start on Monday. If that happens, the winter meetings could be hella fun because
everyone's saying that, and I mean everyone. Passan, Olney, Ken Rosenthal, our colleague, everyone's like, when Soto signs, floodgates.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
The next week or so could be really fun. So obviously, if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Anything that happens with the Braves, if it's notable of any way, we'll have a show. If it's a serious signing, we'll have a emergency show.
Yep.
So yeah, make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate all the support as always.
Absolutely, we do. Please check out the entire Foul Territory network. We are Hammer Territory. We cover the Braves. There are shows on the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Cubs, and I will not list them all because there's too many, but follow them all. But certainly listen to our show. Subscribe. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. Like the video as you're watching it there. Follow us on social media. We're at Hammer Territory on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Threads, I think we're on there somewhere. That's probably automated, but hey, there's stuff going on across the board. So check us out. We'll have more later on. I'm not exactly sure when the next episode is going to be, but certainly in the next 3 or 4 days, we'll have an episode. Stay tuned. We'll see you all next time.